What if the smartest tool we've ever built is quietly making us think a little less? Not all at once. Not in a way you can easily notice. More like a slow shift. Like moving off the grid and realizing after a while that you've stopped relying on something you once thought you needed. That's the feeling that sits underneath borrowed intelligence. It doesn't begin as a warning. It begins with curiosity, with fascination. The kind of curiosity many of us felt the first time we used modern AI, when it answered in full sentences, connected ideas, and responded almost like a thinking companion. It felt different from older tools. Not just faster or more efficient, but something closer to shared thinking. If you've ever built something off-grid, a water system, a solar setup, even a simple structure, you know that feeling. At first, you're amazed that it works. Then, slowly you start asking deeper questions. What is it really doing? What is it depending on? And what happens if you trust it too much? The book follows that same path. It starts with that early excitement. AI feels like a breakthrough, a tool that can write, explain, summarize, and connect knowledge in seconds. It gives the impression that we've skipped years, maybe decades of effort, like jumping straight to the finished result without going through the long process that usually leads there. But then something subtle begins to stand out. The answers are good, sometimes very good, but they are also smooth, almost too smooth. The rough edges of real thinking, the hesitation, the uncertainty, the small gaps where a human might say, "I'm not sure," those are gone. And that absence matters more than it first appears. Because in real knowledge, those gaps are not weaknesses. They are signals. They tell you where the edges are, where understanding ends and exploration begins. In an off-grid life, you learn quickly to respect those edges. You don't assume your system will hold forever. You test it. You question it. You adapt. But AI doesn't show those edges. It presents everything as complete. And that creates an illusion. Not a dramatic one. Not something obviously false. But something quietly convincing. The kind of illusion that feels like truth because it arrives polished and confident. The book describes this as a shift from depth to surface, from something grounded in human experience to something that reflects it, but doesn't fully carry it. And that reflection becomes more interesting when you look at where AI comes from. It's built on fragments, pieces of human knowledge that have been written down, digitized, and made available. Books, articles, discussions, research papers. But even that vast collection is incomplete. There are things we don't understand yet. Things we've never written down. Things passed through experience rather than text. And when a system is trained on what exists, it cannot see what is missing. It treats what it has as the whole picture. If you've ever worked with limited resources on a cabin, a workshop, or any off-grid setup, you know what that means. You work with what you have. And sometimes you fill the gaps with assumptions just to make things function. AI does something similar. It fills in missing pieces with patterns, with probability, with what is most likely to sound correct. And most of the time, it works well enough. But well enough is not the same as true. That's one of the quiet tensions running through the book. Not that AI is useless, it clearly isn't, but that its usefulness can hide its limitations, especially when those limitations are presented with confidence. And then the perspective shifts again, from the tool itself to how we begin to use it. Because once something works smoothly, we tend to lean on it. Just a little at first, then a bit more. Like using a generator before building your own system. Like relying on ready-made solutions instead of figuring things out yourself. There's nothing wrong with that in moderation. But over time, something changes. You stop doing certain things, not because you can't, but because you don't need to anymore. And that's where the idea of borrowed intelligence starts to take shape. Not as a dramatic loss, but as a gradual replacement. A student writes an essay using AI assistance. A manager prepares a report with generated insights. A leader drafts a speech with help from a system that knows how words should sound. Each case looks efficient, even impressive, but underneath, something is missing. The process, the struggle, the part where ideas are formed, tested, questioned, and sometimes fail. In an off-grid context, that process is everything. You don't just install a system, you learn it. You understand its limits. You know what happens when it breaks, because you've been part of building it. Without that process, you're left with something that works, until it doesn't. And that's where the book becomes less about technology and more about habits. Because the real shift isn't happening inside the machine. It's happening in us. We begin to prefer smooth answers over messy thinking, quick results over slow understanding, convenience over effort. Not because we've decided to, but because the option is there. And once it's there, it's hard to ignore. The book doesn't present this as a sudden collapse. It's more like a quiet drift, a gradual move away from something foundational. You can still do the thinking yourself. You can still question, explore, and struggle through ideas. But there's always an easier path available. And over time, that easier path becomes the default. One of the more interesting ideas early on is how this affects not just individuals, but the environment around us. The internet itself begins to change. More content is generated. More text is produced by systems rather than people. And that content starts to blend in. It looks human. It sounds human. But it may not carry the same depth of experience behind it. And then comes a subtle but important question. If future systems are trained on that content, what are they really learning from? Not directly answered yet. Just introduced as a possibility. That knowledge might start to loop back on itself, like an echo. If you've ever stood in a large empty space and listened to your own voice bounce back, you know what happens. The first echo is clear. The second is softer. Then it fades into something less distinct. The book hints at a similar pattern, not as a certainty, but as something worth paying attention to. Because once a system begins to learn from its own output, rather than from original human experience, the nature of that knowledge could begin to shift. It might still look polished. It might still sound convincing, but the foundation underneath could be changing. And again, the off-grid perspective makes this easier to see. If you recycle the same material over and over, without adding something new, the quality eventually changes. It might still function. It might still look intact, but it's not the same as starting from something fresh. The same idea applies here. The concern isn't that AI will suddenly fail. It's that it might continue working, while slowly drifting away from the source that gave it depth in the first place. And if that happens at the same time that people rely on it more and more, then something interesting and slightly uncomfortable starts to emerge. We're not just using a tool, we're adapting to it, quietly, without really noticing. And that's where the introduction leaves you. Not with a conclusion, not with a clear answer, but with a shift in perspective. A sense that what looks like progress on the surface may have another layer underneath. One that depends not just on what the technology can do, but on what we choose to do less of because of it. And that question, what we slowly stop doing, is where things begin to go deeper.